So, how does the murder of one man on a street corner in Sarajevo end up igniting a war that kills millions? That's what we're breaking down today, the single spark that set the entire world on fire.
It really all comes down to this, one wrong turn. I know, it sounds like something straight out of a movie, but this one, simple mistake, kicked off a chain reaction that would end up shattering empires and literally reshaping the world.
And this is the exact moment. Just try to picture it. A royal motorcade takes a wrong turn, totally unplanned. The driver, trying to fix the mistake, stalls the engine. And standing right there on the corner, by what has to be the purest, most terrifying chance, is a 19-year-old assassin, Gavrilo Princip. He thought his chance was long gone. But now, he just steps forward, pulls out his pistol, and fires 2 shots.
Those 2 shots, they were the first shots of a war that would see over 16 million people killed. That number it's almost impossible to even wrap your head around. A local act of terrorism spiraling into a global catastrophe.
This is the big question, right? It just seems impossible. To get the answer, we have to pull back from the assassination itself and really look at the world where it happened.
Because the truth is, the Europe of 1914 was not some peaceful paradise. Not at all. It was a continent just simmering with tension, a whole system under this immense, almost unbearable pressure.
You'll often hear historians call it the European powder keg, and that's really the perfect way to think about it. Imagine a room just packed with barrels of gunpowder. The assassination in Sarajevo, that wasn't the gunpowder. It was just the match that everybody was terrified was eventually going to get lit. The danger had been building up for decades.
Okay, so take Germany. Its situation was a total paradox. On the one hand, you've got this rising star of Europe. It's an industrial giant with a massively powerful army. But on the other hand, Germany was also deeply, deeply paranoid. Its leaders felt completely trapped by enemies on all sides, caught in what they called a tightening noose.
And Germany wasn't alone here, not by a long shot. Every major power had its own set of fears and goals. France was desperate for revenge over territory it had lost. Russia saw itself as the big brother and protector of Slavic nations, like Serbia. Britain was absolutely determined to stop any one country from getting too powerful and dominating the continent. And right at the center of it all was the very fragile, multi-ethnic Austro-Hungarian Empire, just terrified that nationalism was going to rip it to shreds.
So with all that context in mind, let's zoom right back into that one fateful day. Because while the big picture made a war possible, it was a whole series of specific blunders and just bizarre coincidences that made it happen right then and there. You know, the bad judgment started before the Archduke even showed up. The visit was planned for June 28th. Now, to the Austro-Hungarians, that's just a date on the calendar. But to Serbian nationalists, that day is Vidovdan, a sacred day of remembrance for a major historical battle. So, holding a big military inspection on that day, it was seen as a massive insult. And this just shows you the pure chaos of that morning. The assassination almost didn't happen at all. The first assassin on the route completely lost his nerve. The next guy actually threw a bomb, but it had a 10-second delay, so it just bounced off the Archduke's convertible and exploded under the car behind it. The motorcade floors it, and it looks like the Archduke has had this incredibly lucky escape. So after a really tense reception at the town hall, a very shaken Franz Ferdinand makes this noble, but as it turns out, completely fatal decision. He insists that they change the schedule so he can go visit the officers who are hurt in the bombing. And here it is. This is the critical mistake. The plan changed, but nobody bothered to tell the driver. So he just keeps following the original, publicly announced route. When another official realizes what's happening and yells at him that he's going the wrong way, the driver stops the car to turn around, and he stalls the engine, right in front of Gavrilo Princip.
So, with the Archduke dead, the crisis just explodes. It goes from a murder investigation to a massive international showdown. That complicated system of alliances, the one that was supposed to keep the peace, it now becomes a kind of doomsday machine, pulling everyone, one by one, into the conflict. This was the absolute turning point. Austria-Hungary wanted to crush Serbia, but they were afraid Russia would step in to protect them. So, they go to their main ally, Germany, for backup. And Germany gives them what's famously known as the blank check, a promise of unconditional support no matter what they did. This basically gave Austria-Hungary the green light to be as aggressive as it wanted. Just look at how fast everything unravels. For a few weeks, it's just a diplomatic crisis. But then, on July 28th, exactly 1 month after the assassination, Austria declares war on Serbia. That sets off the dominoes. Russia starts to mobilize its army to protect Serbia.
Germany sees Russia mobilizing and declares war on Russia. Then it declares war on France, and when Germany invades neutral Belgium to get to France, Britain declares war on Germany. In about a week, all of Europe is at war.
Now, it's so important to remember that leaders were making choices here. This wasn't all automatic, but they were making these choices inside this incredibly rigid system. Every country had these detailed military plans and mobilization timetables that, once you started them, were almost impossible to stop. Military leaders were screaming at their governments that any delay meant certain defeat. The machine was already in motion.
And this really brings us to the main point of this whole explainer. The assassination in Sarajevo was, of course, hugely important, but it wasn't the fundamental cause of the war. It was the trigger.
So if it wasn't just the assassination, then what was it? What were the deep underlying forces that pushed the world into such a catastrophe?
Well, the real causes were systemic. You had a continent that was just saturated with fear and mistrust between nations. You had these inflexible military plans that basically took decision-making away from the politicians. You had old, unstable empires like Austria-Hungary ready to crumble. You had an alliance system that guaranteed any local fight would become a continental one. And maybe most importantly, you had this culture of aggressive nationalism, where backing down or compromising was seen as a sign of weakness.
That is the key takeaway. The shots that Gavrilo Princip fired didn't create that powder keg. They just lit the fuse. The assassination was simply the signal that revealed a system that was already broken and on the verge of total collapse. And maybe this is the ultimate lesson of what happened in Sarajevo. The greatest danger isn't one single act of violence. It's when an entire system of nations, through fear and rigid plans and national pride, becomes so brittle that it just loses the ability to de-escalate, to compromise, to choose peace. The war had been building for decades. That sunny morning in Sarajevo was just when it finally began.